Now I can't hear you.
Hello, can you
Oh,
hear?
yes. Yes, I can hear you. Awesome. Very cool. Yes, we did it.
I know it's happening. So,
Nice.
thank you guys for joining us today. Whether you're with us right now or watching this later on, we just want to thank you guys and also Fernando, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you
For
so much
sure.
for sharing with us, and we're super excited. Would you mind like just sharing a little bit about yourself and telling us a little bit of your journey?
Sure. So my name's Fernando Campos. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but you guys know me from my dancing and DJing days as a taboo and everything with House of Hybrids and Brendan and House of Drums. And so just been in the dance community for a long time. I mean, been dancing here in South Florida. I moved here when I was 8. Definitely started dancing around middle school. So probably like around 12 is when I started to do more dance events. Like you just get kind of into the mix. And I got my first dancing job at 17. And from there, you connect with other dancers. You see, how you can be a big fish in a small pond, and then the pond just gets bigger, and you're just like, oh my gosh, look at this. Like I was the cool, I was the best dancer at that quinceañera, but then it becomes like a bigger and bigger bowl, and you're like, wow, there's so many amazing dancers. All that to say, definitely exposed me to a lot of creativity and opportunities like acting and all that stuff, which eventually channeled me into psychology. And I myself actually went through like a really, really bad depression, and that depression led me to seeing a therapist, and then seeing that therapist led me to realize this was what I wanted to understand about life. While I still have the creative side of myself, dancing and acting and all that kind of stuff, fascinated by psychology. And then this is the end of that story, basically studying as much as I can, getting my master's in marriage and family therapy, eventually getting my own business and having my private practice. So now this is what I do. I get to talk to people and help people navigate their own psychology as well as relational psychology. How does this work with me and my partner? How does this work with me and myself? And it's a fascinating conversation to study and then to help people get through. So that's kind of what I do for a living now. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the whole story of Fernando.
Yeah. Oh my God. And that's amazing because to think that, like the story that you had to go through to get to this point,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's mind blowing. Would have you ever imagined this, like you turning into a psychiatrist and a psychologist and doing this?
When I was younger, no. I think I just had un how do I explain underexplored dreams. I remember my first dream was like, oh, I want to be like a marine biologist. But the truth was, I just wanted to hang out with dolphins. I just thought the idea of hanging out with dolphins, and then you like learn that like a lot of these corporations where you get to do those things, it's not the best place, right? I still give it up for the people who study it, because the fact that they study it and the fact that they're training in those locations, like they obviously have a very strong bond with the animals. Like that's why they studied it and they got to that position, right? But then it's like when you find out what's in the hot dogs, and you're just like, oh man, even the good ones have to be under maybe companies that aren't necessarily doing what's in the best interest. So that whole experience of thinking you know what you want, and then finding out that you have no idea about what you want, much less about who you are, especially at like 17. Like, how much do any of us really, we know we have desires, but we don't really know us, right? So
Mm,
it's crazy to think that like that severe depression just created a lot of space for me to understand this passion, right? They often say like when you have that sadness, when you have those kinds of experiences, they really, if you really work through them in a healthy way, you find out so much more about yourself than you ever did going into that experience. Uh,
mm.
so it's kind of interesting that for me, I remember very, very strongly, like before I ever met the therapist, sitting in that room and just feeling like this is where I'm supposed to be. Like this conversation is where I'm supposed to be. And I would say from that moment on, I'm not shocked, because that moment was just so like clear cut and like crystal, like this is what I wanted to do. But every moment before that moment, I would have never guessed. This is not what I would have predicted in my youth at all.
That's so crazy, right?
Yeah, wild. Yeah.
Now, speaking of like you dealing with your mental health and becoming aware of that, there's a lot of people, especially young individuals, or when we're like, in early stages of our life, that we don't really understand what is happening.
Mhm.
So what are some common signs that, like, that you would say someone is having, for them to know that they might be struggling with mental health?
That's a tricky one. So there's like, I want to say it in two parts, right? There's like the most Googleable answer, let's call it, right? So like, how is your sleep? How negatively, like how are little are you sleeping, or how too much are you sleeping, right? So sleep is a really good metric. How tired are you? Do you feel exhausted by life, where you're constantly trying to recover? It kind of reminds me of like a cell phone,
Mm,
right? And it's like, how different do we treat our phones when they're at 100% versus at like 8%?
mm-hmm,
Right. So if you're just at 8% and you're constantly like letting it drop down to 2% and then charging it to 8%, and then you're just in this kind of panic state, versus like you could charge it to like 90% and now you're just kind of like calmer. So I would say, like, if we look at our lives and we think about ourselves, and do we feel like we're charging ourselves to 100 or even in the 90s, or do we just feel like we're constantly operating at this like below 20% feeling? So that's a really good sign. So there's a lot of signs like fatigue, these obvious ones, but I think the biggest issue is that a lot of the signs that the universe gives us, or that we perceive ourselves, we can sort of rationalize away. We can say, oh, this is what life is. This is what relationships is. It is what it is, right? A very popular statement, right?
yeah.
And usually the things that we need to address the most are behind the wall that says it is what it is. So what I try to encourage people to do is just keep track and be aware. Like, let's say journaling is a huge thing, not because, a lot of people are like, well, if I think these things, why do I have to put them down? And it's like, well, you forget, you forget like how you're feeling, you forget the experiences. But if you keep track of that for a little bit of time and you start to see a pattern, like, don't let me tell you what the pattern is, you tell yourself, then you might notice areas that you live with normally that are anything but normal, right? You're like, yeah, I barely ever get more than 3 hours of sleep a night. And like, sometimes people live this way for a long time and they don't even realize it. How many people need to update the prescription on their glasses, and then they do after years and years, and they're like, oh my God, I can see again. uh, so it lets me know that sometimes people are living in this obvious deficit. They
Mm,
obviously can't see as good because they've had their glasses on before. So they know what it is to see better, but they just get so used to not seeing well that they just think that this is what seeing is,
mm,
until they put their glasses on. So that's why it's like keeping a journal, or like just finding a way of keeping track of oneself so they can realize um, that they haven't been sleeping, or that they haven't been connecting, or that they feel drained, or whatever the case may be. Because aside from those symptoms, the fact that we can become blind to them, that's the thing that I would try to help people to recognize in the world, whether they are a struggling dancer or a successful dancer or a therapist or whatever. Like, if you're not keeping track, you're probably not realizing how you're doing a disservice to yourself somewhere.
yes, and it's crazy how blind we can be to our own selves. It's like exactly what you said, like, oh yeah, I just do this, this is my life. Like,
Yeah, this is just what it is. I wake up every morning, my shoulder hurts, and it's like, have you gone to the doctors? Not in 20 years, you know. Then you're like, hey, you needed to go to the doctors a long time ago, you know.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Fernand, what would you say are some like indicators that it's time to see professional help? And how can someone take the steps to do that? Because, like, we just, the stress, the work, and obviously all the stigmas that there is about mental health is kind of like one of those things that, I'll deal with it later. Or, like, oh, people deal with a lot worse. And so,
Yeah.
what would you say?
Yeah, it's like another two-parter, because I would say, like, my honest answer is everyone. I think that a lot of people we can find a lot of reasons to fill in those blocks with other things. I have to work, so I don't have time. I have family, so I don't have time. I have children, so I don't have time. Like, I think there's a lot of things that we can put in that place. But it is something that everyone needs to make the time for, I believe, because too many people are looking for signs to qualify them as needing professional help. And I think it's better to do it the opposite way. Just accept and assume that everyone has blind spots and
Mm.
cannot see their own blind spots. It's like you cannot look at your own back unless you have what? A mirror. No matter how
Yes.
much you like do this, you're not going to see your own back. So it's kind of the question to someone who's trained in this is comes across like, how do we know when you need to be able to look at your own back? And it's like, well, if you can have some sort of illness in your back, then everyone needs to have someone who can look on their back for them and help them in that way, you know? So that's why I would say if you're alive, and I think a big wall is time and money, right?
Mhm.
Time, I hate to say it, but this is on you. This is on everyone. Everyone has to, whether you're trying to make time for your children or for your significant other or for work or anything. I think the majority of the population does not know how to budget their time. Most likely because they're not aware of their time. Not truly. They know that they work a lot. They know that they do a lot, but they're not really aware of their time. And just like finances, like if you're not aware of your money, you're probably overspending. Like you're probably spending beyond what is healthy, or you're not spending in the healthiest ratio, let's say, right?
Yeah.
So you can always make more money, but you can't make more than 24 hours a day. So the time thing is everyone's responsibility to learn how to manage their time, and therapists can help in that stuff. But the other one is money, and there's a lot of free opportunities or free to paid, right? People may have insurance, or let's say I have zero insurance, zero anything. There's usually some universities or colleges around that may be having like therapists in training where the sessions could be maybe $5, right? And I remember being a student who used to, the Nova Southeastern University, they had a clinic there to help people. When you go to like a Veda to get a haircut from someone who's learning, right? This is like that, but then you also get maybe 5 or 6 other students, as well as a professor who's usually licensed, or they have to be licensed to be helping out. So you're getting like a lot of support for very little amounts of money. And then there's also government granted programs where you can apply to them and kind of give them your situation. So money wise, I think that there's opportunities for this conversation regardless of money. Time wise, it's a necessity. It's not something that should be an option. And that's where people are starting to learn that it is not it's not a privileged thing. It should be like a everyone thing,
Yes.
um yeah. And then where people can probably so that's like the therapy answer. The one that most people want to know is like, how do I know that I really need it? If you feel a sense of helplessness or hopelessness in a situation, and like, and I think most people have somewhere in their world where they feel that sense. If we find ourselves saying it is what it is, kind of like this brutal acceptance without ever really having that conversation, I would say take that into a therapy room. If it is what it is, we shouldn't be afraid to have a professional also agree with that. But if it isn't, or if there's something else, then why would we not want to hear that information? So that's kind of the answer for that.
That's great, Fernando. Thank you. Because I mean, yeah, it's a lot of times people just, or no, we we just set it aside, and it's like,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so something that I have found extremely, extremely helpful, Fernando, has been community, and obviously
Okay.
having that support,
Yeah.
system. Now, obviously, as we get older, it starts to become more difficult, and also with our busy lives and everything. And so, like, how important is the support system, and in what ways can people like build one if they don't have one?
Okay. Um, so, well, importance level extremely high. Like I would say maybe of the most, like when we think of the word community, we can often think of a location like a church community or community of dancers. And I would encourage people to think of themselves as the center of a community that they are creating, right? So let's say in their community, they have like, these are like the work associates, and these are the dance associates, and these are the, so each person has this sort of like universe that goes around them and that they enter, and, so making sure that that community is healthy. So you don't have to have a huge dance community. You can have maybe a lot of small communities that connect and support you in different ways and that kind of stuff. So making sure that you have some kind of sense of community is usually very important for people to have, good feedback or good support system, even growth. There's a lot to that piece, but what they can do to build it, because it's so important that that community supports the individual, it requires the individual to understand what's the best community for it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be communities that are solid, but they're just not the right communities for me for whatever reason, So let's just say like a community of like intense debaters, they may be good for supporting each other as lawyers and that kind of stuff, or, but then like that sensation of like being debated with constantly may be something that's like iron sharpens iron in one community, but for another person can be like, do you have to debate everything? Like it can be overwhelming to them. And we should always look to see like maybe there's something we could learn from that community, even if it's not directly our community, but it does come down to what is my community? What community do I want? Do I want a community of dancers? Well, then I need to also dance privately. I need to be a dancer within myself, I should say, to better understand that would be something that I would like surrounding me. I personally, like, I'll tell you, I love any type of creativity. I love deep thinkers, and I like things like puzzles and escape rooms and stuff like that. So my community is going to probably be with people who like these, like, we can call them nerdier type activities and board games and things of that nature. But I also like to be acrobatic and move and dance, not just in a competitive way, but so like you can start to see like, what is that tribe? What does my tribe look like if I really can cultivate it? But it has to start off with me. Who do I want to be? Which also then helps to inform what is the best surrounding for me, because sometimes different crops need different nutrients, and they're all viable and all good. It's not like a tomato is better than corn, but maybe they just need a different type of fertilizer, and your community is your fertilizer. So if you just are trying to fill it with people, you might be filling it with the wrong fertilizer, and wondering why you're not growing.
And I feel like that happens a lot. It's like, we find our people, our tribe, and sometimes like we just oversaturate ourselves so much with that we forget. And this is another question that I have for you. Would you say it's healthy to be part of or have different communities and not just stick to one?
Yes, I think it's very important. Not just because, going back to that individual thing, like how your community is a reflection of your nutrients,
Mm.
understanding that even if you've dedicated the last 20 years of your life to dance, that you are so much more than a dancer. You've just dedicated 20 years of your life to dance because maybe that was the passion you saw, and maybe of all of the things that you've ever been exposed to in life, that was like the number one thing, which is totally fine, and then you go for that dream and everything. But what if there was something better than that for you? You just never got exposed to it. Maybe you would have been a chef, a culinary, or a baker, or maybe you were supposed to be a sculptor, but you just never got your hands on clay. You never found that direct passion or energy experience, not because you couldn't, but because it just never happened. It just never, like, recently I've decided I wanted to learn sewing. Right. I've seen a couple people. Yeah. It's pretty interesting because it's not a very male, not to say it's not supported by men, but I've never had any of my dudes kind of be like, yo, you should learn to sew. Right. I know my dad told me he could sew when he was younger, but it was maybe one conversation. But watching these like sewing shows, watching these things, I started to understand how being able to custom tailor your outfits makes a huge difference. And if you can make your shirt feel better, you will look better. You may feel better. It's more to you. And that also helps you with self-esteem, with confidence, all that kind of stuff. So developing a skill like sewing and being able to tailor not only for you, but your significant other, if you have kids, like you can actually custom tailor. Like I don't even know who I am in that realm because I've never been exposed to that.
Mm,
So by exposing myself to many different areas of life, I start to learn more and more about myself, because the things that I learned while I was dancing are probably not the same things that I'm going to learn about myself while I'm sewing. So my
mm,
communities also show a reflection of the openness of my own experience and like of myself. Again, nothing wrong with loving and prioritizing like one of those communities,
mm,
but we often don't expose ourselves enough to alternative experiences to know how much we could be satisfied in other areas of our life. So that's why I would say it's important not only to just, expand our communities, but to expand ourselves, to understand why expanding those communities is actually a good reflection of me. It's a
mm,
good reflection of my nutrients, let's say, that I want around me. So
mm. I love that. And I feel like a lot of the times the thing that kind of like stops people or keep us from trying like different things or expanding ourselves, it's fear.
yeah.
And it's like this like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough or if people are gonna like me or if I'm gonna, and so
Yeah.
like to take care of that self-esteem and that like that fear that happens, where do you say that comes from, and what are some simple like self-care practices that people can do on a daily basis to make sure that they kind of like protect themselves from those negative self like
Mm, yeah. No, the
thoughts?
negative self-talk, that, yeah. So those fears often come from things like trauma or the underdevelopment or challenging of fearful experiences. Like, take for instances, most fears exist more in our imagination than in reality, right? So let's say I got bit by a dog once when I was a child. I may have multiple dreams of that. I may have nightmares of that. And I may have all sorts of multiple experience of that, but it only happened, let's say, one time. And it's like that kind of like traumatic event. So there's so many ways that like the fear can get in us. And unfortunately, especially as adults, we have forgotten all of the instances that made us afraid as children. Like, we don't remember all of the things. Like, if we remember some of them, know that you remember a very small amount of things that you experienced, because you just can't remember that well. But your body remembers. Your body remembers that you have that fear, and has this like, irrational reaction to, let's say, the dark, or to reptiles, or to certain insects, or to, roller coasters, whatever it is. Like, our body has this anxiety through that experience, and it kind of creates this aversion. All that to say, it makes sense to avoid it, but if you avoid it, it only gets stronger. It's sort of like confirming it. It's like, imagine if I'm afraid of a bully down some street, and I just avoid that street, and then that bully moves, and then I avoid that street, and then every time that bully moves, I avoid the street. Well, then I will consistently be afraid of it, and then probably even more afraid. I've been running from this bully for 5 years. I've been running from this bully for 10 years. We all have bullies in our lives like this. There are some things that are healthy and safety wise, like, you should be afraid to jump into oncoming traffic, because you will get hurt by that, right? And that's
Yeah.
like, it's a different type of hurt. But how many times have we been at our desk or something, and like a superior or authority figure walks past us, and a cop is driving behind you, and you be innocent. You look at the speeding dial, you're like, I'm under the speed limit, and people get afraid because of that anxiety. So the only way you can really work on it is to do it, like, to work on it. You have to actually keep track of it. You write certain things down. Let's say the negative self-talk you kind of said, maybe that comes from a sensation of being not good enough. Sometimes this can come, what's so fascinating with people is that some of these same anxieties can develop from opposite experiences. So let's say a person who never gets first place, never
Mm,
gets first place. They always get third in their family. They're always like kind of chasing, trying to prove themselves, and they never win. They're always losing the games, right? This person may kind of feel like I'm never good enough. I'm never gonna be. I'm always third place. I'm never accepted, and so they may develop a sense of fear of rejection. Oh, I'm gonna get rejected again. Why would I enter that competition? Why would I do that? I'm just gonna get rejected. So they have this anxiety of that experience of not being good enough. Meanwhile, the person who always wins first place is like, well, everyone loves me because I win first place. I have to win first place. I'm never going to be good enough. I always have to keep being better so that I can stay in first place. And so they can start to get anxious and feel like they'll never be good enough because they always win, but because they always have to win. And so you see how they can both end up feeling like nothing is ever good enough because of the perspectives they have on either winning or losing, because it can come about either way. You can win a certain way where you still get anxious. You can lose a certain way. But the reverse is also true. You can lose and not have anxiety. You can lose and accept and appreciate the experience, and you can develop this and work on this experience. You can also win and go, you know what? I love the fact that I won, but the fact that I won isn't where my value comes from. Like I'm gracious. I'm thankful that I got here and I won this competition or won whatever it is. But like what makes me is the fact that I get to read with my son at night, or the thing that makes it, there's so many other things that validate my experience and my existence that I'm grateful for the victory, but the victory does not really make me better or worse than anyone. I just happen to win today. And so they may not have the same pressures and all that kind of stuff. So this is why the conversation about our psychology, being interested in journaling and just kind of keeping track of like, what are the things that I say about myself? And do I believe that I might say things about myself that aren't true? No one likes you. No one wants to be with you. No one will ever see you. No one finds you pretty. No one finds you smart, or you're just not, and how many times, this is a great one. We're in a relationship with someone who has shown time and time, like they love, they care, and like they've been together for a long time. And this is a phrase that always gets to me in an interesting way is, if you cared about me, XYZ, and the thing is, like, they do care about you. They just also do XYZ, because in their world, their version of caring about you may include XYZ. Right. And so we get this interpretation that, like, the only reason this happened to me is because they don't love me. And then, people get defensive. I do care. I hate when you say I don't care. I obviously do care. And, all that kind of stuff. So we can have these assumptions, not only towards others, but towards ourselves. We can think, you're ugly. No one's going to want to talk to you. And because of that, at the party, I stay away from everyone because I'm afraid of rejection. And then I kind of confirm my belief that no one came up to talk to me, because I really was already closed from the beginning. So everyone is susceptible to this. We call a lot of these, let's say, cognitive distortions, where we may think we think this like maybe generalized way that is hurting us, and it can be outwards. If 3 Latin women cheat on me in a row, then I can develop this mentality that like all Latin women are cheaters, but that's not the case. Maybe who I was entertaining and how I met them and all that kind of, who knows, right? But that generalization is not good. But then I could also say, well, no one gave me their number, so I must be ugly. And what we usually recommend people to do is write down some of these beliefs or some of these thoughts that we say to ourselves, and then actually challenge them on paper, not in our mind, because in our mind, it's not the best place to have this tug of war, but writing these things down and then going, is this a healthy thought? Is this a healthy way of approaching things? A lot of people use shame to fuel success, right? They look at themselves in the mirror and they shame their bodies in order to work out. Look at you haven't been exercising. Look at you haven't been dancing. That's why, they use shame as a fuel source, but then they have poor self-esteem, because that's a toxic fuel source versus being inspired. All right, my body was better before, but you know what? I know it can be better, but I don't need to be ashamed of my body where it's at currently. I can be proud of my body now. I can be more proud of my body later. I can maybe be more inspired and all that kind of stuff. But checking to see what our fuel source is and writing those things down. Sorry, I can go on like a rant sometimes.
Don't love that.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's where I would say, yeah, to overcome those things, you can't overcome something you don't understand. And if you're judging it and you're wrong, you don't understand. So taking more time to be curious about those fears, taking time to be aware of those things, once we have a greater sense of awareness, we can often do things like somatic exercises or challenging our thoughts. There's like a lot of different techniques, but no technique works on something you're not aware of.
Hmm. I love how it's one of those things that we ourselves we get in our own way.
Yeah.
But it's just that it's so hard, and it's what you're saying. It's hard for us to realize it, to see it, and to take any action. Because again, we're like blinded by our own negativity, and
Yeah. Yeah. Our humanity. It's our day-to-day lives,
Mm,
kind of COVID showed it, right? COVID showed that when the world slowed down and you actually had to sit in your experience, most people had not built lives for themselves that they were actually satisfied with. You know,
mm.
how many people were like, maybe at the first week or two, like, I don't have to go into the office. Yay. I don't have to, like I get to work from home. Oh my gosh. And then they had to work from home and are like, I don't really like this experience. I don't really know who I am. Who am I living with? Like just so many different things when things slow down, right? Which lets us know that we kind of busy our way through our lives. We get through it because we just disassociate. I didn't realize that I lived 18 hours today because part of like 2 hours of it was in traffic or, all that kind of stuff. So it's like just being human and cultivating these busy lives prevents us from seeing it, which is why they say, you have to slow down, smell the roses, right? And
Yes.
to better understand, there's nothing wrong with being busy, but am I being busy for me? Am I being busy for a corporation that doesn't give, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this or not, but so said no, I can prevent it, but yeah, does this company give a about me, and so and unfortunately a lot of people work really hard for entities that don't really work hard for them, but they don't know until it's too late. They don't realize how they've given of themselves to a certain degree because they've been busy, and so this is why I say everyone. And if anyone is like, not me, I'm like, especially you, like, especially you. Give me 5 minutes to have a conversation with you to just like, it's like people have such fragile Jenga towers. Like they're all like, no, my tower is solid. And I'm like, poke. Oh my God, don't poke that. Like, and it's like, so why are we all fooling ourselves to believe that our Jenga towers are as strong as we want to believe them when we know without going to a therapist that there are some bricks that are like very, shaky. So I'm like, man, just everyone needs to accept that their towers that they have built are not optimal. I'm not saying that they're all bad or they're all garbage, but very rarely can we do it optimally without support or without some other perspective, especially non-biased ones, right? Because maybe the perspective we have is supported by our family members, maybe it's rejected by our family members, and maybe that has nothing to do with whether it's right or wrong. It just has to do with you're either like supported in that culture with that perspective, or you just naturally feel oppositional to that perspective. Right or wrong is irrelevant when your whole world is saying you should go left and you're like, I guess I should go left, that seems about right. But what if you say you need to go right? So yeah, everyone needs to have those conversations, especially with someone who's non-biased, so that they can get a good healthy feedback from that interaction.
Yes, and I mean, seeing different therapists is like it is extremely helpful to have a space where you're free to speak your mind and all of that craziness that you don't want anybody else to.
Yeah, no, it's the best. It's it's, I don't know how to explain it. It's freeing, right? And even there, even being a therapist, people still hide stuff. People have like very deep layers. And so, let's say people have 5 layers. Maybe they share the first 2 with their friends. Maybe they test me. Maybe the first day they give me layer number 2. And then after a little bit of time, right, and trust building, like, do they actually believe in my insight and my information and my approach? Now that they've built that trust, now they're like, oh, let's go to 4, right? And you're like, all right, we're going to 4. But oftentimes I'll feel it. I'm like, ooh, there's a 5. And this person isn't ready for that. And sometimes they just outright tell you, like right at the beginning, they're like, yeah, we could talk about anything, just don't talk about my parents. And then I am, as a therapist, like, don't talk about parents. I won't talk about parents at all until you say that it's okay. Don't talk about parents. And then on my side, I'm like, parents, parents, but don't talk about it yet.
Yeah.
And respect that until you can develop a sense of trust. And sometimes over time, maybe not a long time, but if you really can handle the little, then sometimes there's a sense of trust in handling the deep like that. And that's a really cool experience. But I wish more people in the population could see how they all would like that experience. And maybe I have to do also like a PSA. Not every therapist is right for you. I'm not going to here to say that they're good. I'm not here to say that they're bad. I'm just saying, and I'm looking at the camera because it's like, not every therapist is right for you. But therapy is. The conversation is. So, like, if you have a therapist or if you've experienced a therapist and it just didn't fit, it just wasn't the vibe, or for any reason you hate them, that's fine too. Find another one, because the conversation's important. But the therapist, that's not necessarily the most important part of it. Obviously, it's helpful having somebody who studies and passionate, all that kind of stuff. But you got to find someone who's right for you. So, yeah, don't let that get in the way.
Yes. Fernando's, we have spoken and this has like been brought up. It's like a lot of times we get in our own ways and we do all of this harm to ourselves. And it seems like that starts off, or it could be, or it could have started from like a very young age, or
Yeah.
situations that happen in an early age, but we have just never known, understood, or had anyone to talk to about it. Now, obviously, as a dance instructor and, someone that deals with a lot of other adults that deal with a lot of children, how can adults better support the younger generation's mental health, even if it's as parents or maybe as teachers or mentors? Because when you're 18, when you're not the parent or you're not someone that's in that children's life every single day, like all the time,
Yeah.
but you can still have some positive or even negative effects on them. And so, like, what are some things that us as adults can do to better support like these kids? And what do you wish more teachers, parents, or mentors understood about what young people are really going through emotionally and mentally today? Because things have changed a lot. Social media has, changed things a lot. And obviously, as we get older, we understand, we live, we have experienced things differently. And so, if you need me to repeat the question, let me know. But
No. So no, as far as for what I believe adults can do to support the younger generation, and this also includes non-parental figures like teachers, support systems, in different ways. So I was writing down. So a few things. One is supporting their own treatment. That's probably the biggest thing that they can do, right? All of the best things are going to come from our own work. And oftentimes we can try to put on someone else's air mask before putting on our own, And so there's a lot of teachers, there's even a lot of therapists who don't have therapists. They don't get that. And the ironic part of that is like their job, their education lets them know how strongly that's not a good thing. It's okay to be in a state of transition. Sometimes, I've had a therapist go, I got to take a little bit of time to transition to a new one. But always being an avid pursuer of that is very important, because it's you, the person, like me, not Taboo, not the LMFT, Fernando Campos, is going to affect everything that I put my hand on. So if I haven't slept well, if I haven't been eating well, if I'm not doing well, if I'm anxious, if I'm depressed, like, how is that not going to affect my daily life and my work? Like, how is that not going to interfere with, if I'm going through a breakup and it's a horrible breakup, how am I, like, it's not that I cannot support people in relationships, right? But how am I not going to potentially see certain similarities or feel certain things and have more difficulty staying, unbiased, like staying more separate from this when, I'm just making stuff up. So let's say like I went through something and, they cheated on me, and now I'm working with a couple who is cheating, and or somebody, like, how is that, or I'm going to be affected. So the first answer, definitely getting treatment for ourselves, knowing that this really does make a difference. Not saying that, let's say you're a dance teacher and you get therapy for yourself, that then you're going to be a good therapist for anyone you are a teacher to, right? But you will have a better understanding of things like boundaries, personal responsibility. Hey, maybe my responsibility as a dance instructor is to be open for them to share with me, but if they're asking for something that is intense or something more emotional that I'm like, I don't want to give them any kind of opinion on, that I have some business cards for local therapists. Or maybe I should be aware of what are the free services in my area that allow families to get therapy at low income scenarios, let's say, like, so this type of awareness. So I would say the first one is the getting treatment. The second one would be getting connected, being aware of what resources exist, knowing that sometimes the best thing you can do is call the police, call the fire hydrant, like not try to put out the fire ourselves, right? And if you have a small fire and you're trying to put it out yourself, like, that's understandable, right? But like if your house is on fire, you don't just like, all right, I'm just gonna get the hose. And we do that in our lives. We find out that someone is like suicidal, or we find out that they're going through some, and we're like, we could put it out. And sometimes it's like, no, like, especially if it's not like a family member, right? Because teachers have empathy, regardless of the subject. The fact that there's this desire to want to pass on knowledge, or not every teacher, I guess, has equal empathy, let's call it, but a lot of teachers do care, and they can care so much that they try to help in ways that is beyond their responsibility, capability. Like, there's so many reasons why it's too much. Like, even I, as a therapist, would say to someone with some needs that they need to come see me in the office, because it has to be structured that way. Or maybe that I can't see them, I can't give them their answer, they really need to go to someone else, like professionally, for some of the questions that they have, not like pushing them away, right? But sometimes just the desire to care can be so strong that we take on that role and we don't know how that will impact us. So getting connected, being aware of like what kind of resources and things of that. The last one is get informed. And this is an interesting one, because I don't want to sound like I'm like, get informed. Like, I'm not trying to make it, but I'm going to add not on social media.
Oh my God, yes.
So social media has become this pipeline of information. And for many different reasons, we realize that it's not necessarily giving you a balance of information. It's giving you something that's tailored to you, tailored to your experience, tailored to whatever it may be listening to, tailored to whatever you click on, and all that kind of stuff. And so we get all this information surrounding things like narcissism, right? I can't tell you how many people use that terminology who don't really understand what it means in the DSM, or, and a lot of it is because we want quick, expedited answers. I want to be able to label my man or my woman. I want to be able to quickly identify these types of things, but it's not so easy. I have yet in my years of working ever had someone come in and go, I am a narcissist. Have yet. But I hear oftentimes, I think they're a narcissist,
Mm.
right? Which is kind of narcissistic, you know? Because if I'm analyzing someone else from a position of authority to label them, so the irony of this experience being presented to me, I understand what they mean. Usually what they mean is they saw something on social media and they were like, if you're dating a narcissist or if you're with a narcissist, look out for these traits, right? And it's not to say that that information is straight up wrong, but
Mhm.
we can sometimes connect things in certain ways that isn't really the right way to approach it. Imagine, think about the WebMD. Like doctors are like, oh my gosh, everyone is a doctor now because they have WebMD. But then we find out like actually we're not really that great doctors. We may have certain, it just gets jumbled or whatever. So all that to say, getting informed is not about going on social media and getting the information from a place like that. It has information, but it just has not
Too much.
healthy, balanced information. So it's there to tell you what's wrong with your relationship, what your boyfriend is doing, or what your girlfriend is doing, or to make some parody of it. And it's there to entertain you. That's what social media is there to do, not educate you.
Mm.
And unfortunately, people think entertainment is education. Education can be entertaining, but not everything that's entertaining is actually education.
Mm.
And so this is something that people have to understand and actually go, you know what, I'm actually going to find a course. Let me
Mm.
look for a course on communication. Let me look for a course. You want to learn about diagnosing? Look for a credible course from a university or from someone with experience, because it doesn't have to be like from a college. There are plenty of things online that talk about self-esteem or mental health perspectives from the position of research and statistics, and like healthy, balanced ways. That's very accessible for people to, if they just look for those things online. Um,
Mm.
if they spend, I don't know, $200 on a class and save, I don't know how many hours people are on social media, but oh my gosh. But anyways, these are things that I would say, like, let's say as a teacher, being like, all right, what's one thing that you would like to be more informed about? And see if you can get like a free class on anxiety. You mentioned it earlier. Like, what is that feeling? Dancers, performers know that feeling, right? Because they feel it in when they go to perform. They could be performing for years and years, and they go to hit that stage, and So now it's like if I just took a class or a mini lecture class or something on anxiety and ways of maneuvering that, well, then you would be that much more empowered as a teacher, helping dancers overcome the parts of dance that are limited because of their anxiety, not because of their bodies. They always think it's their bodies. Oh, I'm just not a good dancer. I don't have rhythm. And it's like, well, the pressure of it might scare us into, so we have to loosen up. And so we know that it's psychological as well as mechanical. So
That's crazy. That's crazy, right?
yeah.
And I love how you're putting it and how like you're describing it because it just makes so much sense and that we don't
Yes.
like realize. So it's great. Fernando, I have like four more questions if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, I have time. I'm good. So
Okay. Okay. So speaking of this, like it brought up two things.
sure.
Now, when like obviously as adults trying to like help the younger generation, there's a lot of times we find like these like stigmas that have been created, like either by like an older generation or just like maybe a cultural like just there's some families or people that have their own belief systems that have created this like stigma regarding mental health. And so what actions could we take as adults to like if just in case they're not open to receiving these kind of like advice or tips or like these resources, they're kind of like very dismissal about it. What actions could we take as adults to create a safer space for younger people to open up? And how can we encourage healthy conversations about emotions without making young people or other people, even other people, feel judged or dismissed?
Ooh. what actions can we do as adults to make things safer? You know, it's a it's kind of a trick question because I think most people are doing their best with their instincts to make it safer.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, for everyone, it's limited to just their instincts. Like, how many people think that they're doing something to make it safer when their instincts are actually making it not safer? You know, like their instinct to make certain gestures, their instincts can create anxiety, right? Because let's say you're anxious, you're gonna respond quicker, you know. So like I'll give you like kind of a basic tip and you'll see what I mean with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before giving anyone direction, give them connection, right? So before you ever give them your opinion or any of your opinion or any of your direction, like what they should do, any of that stuff, repeat back to them what they said to see if you even got it in the first place, right? And this will be more than, oh, I get you, or I understand, or no, I know what you mean, or like these little phrases that say that we understand everything about their experience don't actually create that sense of connection. So, you know, even if it's something that you have no inclination of agreeing with, let's say you have a 10-year-old who's like, I really want to smoke weed. Like, I really just want to smoke weed. Like, even I am a cannabis user. Even then, I'd be like, "You're 10, like, you know, like I want to support your use in the future, but like, you know, you're 10, you got to develop, you know, that whole thing." But that wouldn't be the first thing that I said. It would be the last thing. And so, the first thing that I would say is, "Man, why?" Not in like a why, right? Because if I start to go why and I start to challenge them, then I'm really coming from a place of either authority or I'm coming from my own perspective. I'm coming from, I'm not really talking about them. I do care about them, but I'm telling them what I believe they need to hear from my knowledge. And this is where people tend to feel shut down. They feel like it's not safe. You know, why did I even share that I want to smoke weed? I'm 10 years old. I knew they were going to act that way. We all have had this moment, right? So being able to go, okay, what made you want that? Now I'm going to understand, you know, oh, well, Susie gave me back my cookie, which means she doesn't like my cookies anymore. Like, who knows what this 10-year-old is going to say? But if we talk to them a little bit more, we might understand that this is really not about weed. This is about something else. This is about whatever they think is on the other end of that experience. Maybe they think that'll make them more relaxed. Maybe they see their parents smoke and they think that this will make them look cool, or maybe that'll connect them more. Who knows what it is? But the thing is, each one of those different scenarios and different reasons why that kid would ever say that leads to different direction. And it's before I give them any kind of direction, I really, and maybe I don't even give them direction. Maybe this scenario, my job, you know, also knowing like they're 10, so how are they going to get weed in the next 24 hours, is just to know that, like, hey, you know what? I want you to think about what it is that you want. And can you hold off on smoking weed for another week until I see you again? I just want to see what thoughts come to mind. And I haven't told them they should do it, they shouldn't do it. I'm like, hey, can we just like think about it for a week? And even that can be enough to go, oh, you know, I didn't really want to smoke weed. I just wanted to spend time with, you know, who knows what their reasonings would be. So we need to do that. And so going back to that original thing that I was mentioning, the more anxious we are, the less likely we can be patient and listen. The more likely we're going to direct them, especially if we think that it's something dangerous. The more likely that we're going to be impulsive, instinctive in what we do instead of being intentional. So if you live life purely by instinct, you're fucking up somewhere. Oh, I said it there. See, that was mine. That was mine. If you live life instinctively, you're doing that, right? It was less intentional. That was more instinctive of me, right? And in a situation like this, it doesn't really hurt too much, doesn't really do anything in a situation like this. But what if this situation needed for me to be more intentional in that moment? What if that conversation needed for me to be more intentional and I don't know how to be intentional, or I don't know how to be intentional when I'm afraid? I become more instinctive. So if you're behaving purely out of instinct, then you're missing a lot of the marks. So that's why I so emphasize that each person, the adults that want to make the kids feel safer, have to do this stuff. Because if they believe in everything that I've said, if they believe in all of it, right? And they're like, I want to make this a safe place for the kid, but they haven't yet learned how to navigate their own impulsivity, then they're going to be good until they're not. They're going to be good until, if they have some sort of unresolved situation within themselves surrounding homosexuality, their kid is probably going to be more afraid to tell them that they're gay. Like if they, or they're going to have some kind of reaction to it because they haven't really been into, they've avoided that, or, whatever their instincts, or if they, if their kid was going to go to, they got a scholarship to go to Harvard, but they dream about being in the Air Force. No, that's the wrong, what? Right? Because we're coming from a position of self, and maybe we don't understand that for whatever reason, that kid sees something in this area, this direction, that they don't see in the direction that, of Harvard, or, whatever the case may be, right? So it's like, even with all of the belief in the world, if you're operating instinctively, you're going to fall short, and you're not going to create the safest place that you can create, because you haven't worked on your ability to be intentional over instinctive, which is discipline, right? But so yeah, so going back to that first bit, the short tip is communicate more about what they're saying versus about what you want to say about them or about it. Communicate more connection versus personal direction, that kind of thing. And then the second tip is that part is a lot harder if you haven't done the work yourself.
Fernando, you're dropping fire. Gee. This is so great.
Sometimes I wish I had a DJ in my therapy sessions. I went bam, 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 bam. How dope would that be? Oh my gosh. And it's because you never got hugged by your dad. Bam, 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 bam. No, I'm just kidding. You never, like, what's crazy is that when people finally make the connection, there's just like a liberation, like this, I feel like a lot of them, they might be crying, but there's a part of themselves that's like, man, 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 man. Like, it's there. It's finally out. It finally, wow. It finally makes sense. It's not that I'm lazy. It's that I'm anxious. And every time I was told to study and I didn't understand how to study, or I just felt like I was going to fail anyways, or like I got anxious. And so I avoided it. And I was playing video games, but it's not that I'm lazy. I did want to do it, but I just got so overwhelmed. And that's how I cope with my feelings of overwhelmness, right? How many people have no idea how many hours they're on social media, and everyone should check on their phone right now. Everybody who's watching this, check on your phone. See how many hours like you put into social media, how many languages you could have learned in that time, how many dance moves you could have learned, how much you could have done with your time. But we sometimes avoid those things by going on social media. So, bam, 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 bam. Anyways, yeah. So it'd be fun. But yeah, what were you saying? Sorry, I got hyped.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly right.
Okay, so obviously having these conversations isn't easy for anybody.
Sure.
So, like, I feel like I speak more for, like, especially the younger generation, that, like, I feel like if they could learn this stuff now, or they could hear it, I feel like it would, like, just facilitate things.
Yeah.
But obviously this regards, like, students, teens, young adults. Like, are there any healthy ways to express their truth, even if they feel ignored, misunderstood, or silenced?
I would encourage them to always express their truth, at least privately first. This is just step one. How much of my truth have I written down for myself to consume? Like writing these things down, like the journaling, right? These types of things I think is really important. I have to be very honest when it comes to the teenagers, let's say 17, 18 and younger, because they have a variety of autonomy. There are some households that give the 10-year-old basically the same access as like an adult. They can make their bedtime. They have so much autonomy. But you have other experiences where someone is like in their 20s and they don't have autonomy. Like they never had autonomy. I always had to watch my younger brother. I always have to, this type of thing. So expressing their fullest opinion as authentic as possible may not always have the healthiest surrounding to make it safe, right?
Mhm.
What happens when a girl is 13 and she is trying to tell her mother that some of her behaviors with the men she dates is inappropriate?
Mm.
It's not wrong, and it's something the mom needs to hear, right? But it doesn't mean that expressing it is going to get better results. It's still, this is where I would say, like, journaling, those types of things, it is something that that person can get support, from either a therapist or trying to express that to their mom, right? But let's just fast forward in this. I'm just making this kind of thing up, but let's say the mom has been violent with them in the past. It's hard to tell that kid, hey, you got to tell them if that kid has the threat of violence.
Mhm.
So the answer of just say everything doesn't always mean that's the best way of approaching those relationships. Sometimes making sure that we're protected, making mention, and obviously this is where, I'm getting into territory where therapists have to report and stuff like that, because it's a nightmare. It's a torturous experience, that whole thing. And unfortunately, a lot of teenagers, I'm using an extreme example, but a lot of them may feel somewhat of that limitation in their lives, or toddlers, different ages. So
Yeah.
it's important that they have a sense of authenticity, and ideally they have some support somewhere around them that is encouraging of it in a healthy way. uh, Sometimes it's not always the family members, and so this is where at least having a central point like a journal, or having some place where we can put some of these thoughts and these concepts, ideally then bringing that to a supportive adult who can then help them navigate some of those experiences. And I totally understand why there's a lot of people in situations like that that would never tell their therapist that they've been hit. They'll never tell, and I totally understand why. I obviously, we want to encourage them to be open and honest because we want safety in mind, but they have safety in mind too. And I'd be ignorant to dismiss the fact that they're trying to keep themselves safe, but they're also trying to navigate this experience.
Mhm.
So again, journaling is a place where you can at least, and a private journal ideally, there's a lot of good journal apps on the phone that people can use to, like, express themselves there. And then if they have a family member that they trust, let's say mom, dad, that they feel like they can openly share these types of things, ideally working their way up to the more sensitive topics. I would even say don't go for the most sensitive right away if you don't believe that your mom or your dad or your sibling has been able to understand you at a less sensitive topic. Like, work your way up, build that trust and stuff. um,
Mhm.
but give them an opportunity if they can. And some people learn, and they're willing to understand, like, oh, maybe I need to, like, this is something I've shared with my parents, is like, hey, sometimes I just want you guys to not tell me to do left, to go right. Like, I just want you to hear my options that I'm processing and my reasoning for going left. And I just want to communicate that with you. I'm not looking for advice.
Mhm.
Like, I would like to share an experience. Just know I just need you to hear me, not to tell me a direction. Now, I'm a lot older, so I can express all that stuff, and my parents listen to me more now than they ever have. But yeah, this is something that, as long as you have a place where you can put your authentic thoughts and cultivate it within yourself, then if you don't have a good environment for it, you don't lose yourself.
Mm. Mm.
And then because you keep that core still there, and then we talked about community and things of that nature, then we can find community, whether it's within our family or not within our family, but at least that core message, the thing that we've been writing, is still there even in our youth.
Yeah. Mm. I feel like these next two questions kind of have been answered already.
Sure.
But like, how can young people, or even like, even if I mean, sometimes it's like anybody, because sometimes you just don't have anyone to talk to, even as adults, you still don't find that comfort with anybody. But mainly young people, how can they advocate for their own mental health while still respecting the adults in their lives? And then, like, what are some tools or strategies for setting boundaries or asking for help when the people around them don't believe in therapy or mental health struggles? But I feel like, um,
So with young people in particularly, because they don't have that autonomy, it's hard for them to get, they can always present it, but it's hard to get, let's say, if the parents don't support them, right? That then how do you do that? So that's where young people have school, right? And schools usually have guidance counselors by design. So, and this goes all the way up until college. If you go to any university, it usually includes a few free sessions and things of that nature. So, young people have a different type of opportunity, which is regardless of the parents, they may be able to find resources from within their school systems, and maybe even within their dance communities and things of that nature, right?
mm,
So the best way they could advocate for it within their household would be to probably write those things down. Adults seem to have a way of respecting preparation, right?
mm,
So if a kid tells them, I really want to go see a therapist, right? It's different than if the kid wrote it in a note, in a nice professional email, or like, as silly as it sounds, but like the intention that goes behind the expression can often fuel the recognition, right?
mm,
If it's just in a whims, I want to go to therapy, right? Well, I'm yelling it. I mean, so parent may be like, oh, what do you see? You're just being emotional. You're just being dramatic. Like, all these other things. Not saying that that is okay either, but like, if that kid is like, I really want to go to therapy, maybe I can write down some journal entries over the course of like a couple weeks, right? Like, and not forging it. I mean, like, genuinely, like, hey, if I write down every Monday, I'm going to journal, and I really would like to go to therapy today, blah, blah, blah. And then the next, I really want to go to therapy because I want to work on this. Like, the more they prepare that, so let's say they have 3 journal entries and they
mm,
present that with a little note saying, like, this is where I've been thinking, I would really like to go to talk, I would really like to speak with someone. Like,
mm,
giving the kid the tools of professionalism will ideally, make that parent realize that this is not just an emotional, this is not just like I'm throwing stuff out, I'm not just complaining, like, they're taking the time to really think about this and express themselves. So the more that it seems that children or younger people are prepared in this way to advocate for their needs within their home, the more likely that they will be taken seriously. There's always situations where they still won't be taken seriously, which is where I would encourage, the guidance counselor approach. Sometimes they can have those sessions while they're in school. It's a part of school, so it's not like they're trying to do anything inappropriate. They're just, every kid is allowed to go speak with the guidance counselor. And then
mm,
from there, it can spider web and bridge and create more things from there.
yeah. Oh no, but that's awesome and very helpful. Because no, yes, you're each family and each person, everybody's so different, and so like it's great to know that those tools are there, whether you have that support at home or close to you, or you don't.
Yeah. And I totally get the desire to want to be able to just say it. Like, I would love to just be able to have a household where I can say, hey, I'm feeling bad, I would like to go to therapy. But there's so much on the other end of that conversation. We don't know what this parent has been through. We don't know what experiences they've gone. We don't know any of that stuff, or
Mm,
how they've chosen to resolve those things. Oftentimes when people go through very traumatic instances in their youth, it dismisses the necessity for someone going through something in their eyes is easier to need to go to therapy. It's like I didn't go to therapy, and I, I was, this situation happened. I have sexual trauma. I didn't go to therapy, and I had death, and I saw my uncle get killed, and like sometimes these like really traumatic experiences. If they didn't get therapy for that, then it being like, so your boyfriend broke up with you. What, like, you don't need therapy. Like, you just have to get over it, right? So that makes it sometimes challenging. That's why I'm saying we never know what's on the other side. But again, adults seem to respect professionalism in the workplace. So if you can present some professionalism in the home, this helps to translate this as something beyond immaturity.
Mm.
If this is immaturity or lack of awareness or whatever it is, it's hard to convey that while simultaneously conveying the fact that they made a good email or they wrote a good letter. They took the time. They put time in this. This is not an impulse. So if they put the time in this, they're more serious. This is serious. So that can be a really good way, I think, of helping to convey that.
Yes, I wish you would have known that.
Right? Yeah, we never think about it. We never think about it. It's just like, man, my parents don't listen to me. And I'm like, yeah, they don't listen. So then make them read something.
Mm.
Now, if you have a parent that's going to take your thing and ball it up and throw it away, well, that's a whole nother thing that we got to talk about. And, but, go from there.
Yeah. At least we've got some somewhere to start.
Yeah. What was the second to last question? I feel like I answered the last one, but I didn't answer the second to last one.
um, how can young people or people in general advocate for their own mental health while still respecting the adults in their lives? But
Okay. Okay. So I think that's,
yeah.
no, very cool. All right.
Fernando, thank you so much for this. I mean, we're creating this kind of like, yes, as a way to be able to give people, free information, whether they're struggling with it or maybe they're not understanding something. Because sometimes, we're going through so much, and it's just great to know that we're not crazy. That there's others that are dealing with the same thing, and that there's people that are like so generous, like, and willing to share and help us out, like understanding and through all of this. So thank you, Fernando, so much.
For sure. No, it was a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. Super happy to chat with you. And I appreciate even the opportunity, because really I want to share more of this information with a wider audience, because I think the info helps, like more than like recognition or any of that stuff. It's just, if I can help more people with the words, because it's just words and ideas, right? And
Yes.
it's,
No,
fulfilling my purpose there. So
and it does help. And Fernando, just in case there's like anyone interested on finding you, or see how maybe they could get some more help from you, is there any way that they can contact you,
for
anything that
sure. Yeah. So I mean, on, like, let's say Instagram, I don't take really like business requests. I just kind of redirect it. So I'll say like my work email or my work website is a-gtherapy.com. So a-gtherapy.com. There you can see like information about me, about my practice. You see some dance stuff on there. It's a cool website, but that'll give you all the information about my office hours and that stuff. And there's a whole like consultation process and everything, because we need to make sure that not only are we the right fit for you, but then also that the schedule is aligned and
Mm.
finances and all of that stuff. But that's how that process gets started. But I do also have an Instagram, Fernando Campos _LMFT. Hopefully I'll be posting up some more just general information. But if it's not with me particularly, I would say Psychology Today is a great website. It's a great website directory of therapists. You can go on there, you can put your zip code. They have a bunch of filters. You can filter between, let's say you want a male versus female, you want somebody who works with LGBTQ, you want somebody who works more with religious entities like church or synagogue, things like that, or insurance panels that they take. So there's such interesting filters on there that you can just put your zip code, type that in, and then everyone who's qualified in the way that you want it to be will just show up. And they have pictures They also have videos of people and like a little blurb and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a dating website, but for therapy. So I'm on that website as well, so people could look in for me and Davey and everything. But it's a good resource for anyone who wants to just start this conversation with someone, with me or with someone else. But my website, a-gtherapy.com.
Oh, Fernando, thank you again so much. We just want to have to thank you, huge, huge thank you guys if you joined us. Whether here, well, nobody did, but
You know, it
you're
is what it
joining
is.
us
Yeah,
online. But thank you, Fernando.
for sure. My pleasure. Thank you.